Update. Am I the a-hole for exposing my wife's cheating and not wanting to do anything with a child that isn't mine? Original post. 2 weeks ago, I found out that my 5-year-old child isn't biologically mine. I felt deeply hurt and betrayed when I realized that my wife of 6 years, with whom I've been in a relationship for 9 years, cheated on me and got pregnant by another man. Without telling my wife, I decided to take a paternity test. When I got the results, I immediately confronted her. In my anger, I called her a whore and many other names. She started crying and explained that she hid the truth because she didn't want to break our happy family of 3. When I asked her why she cheated on me, she said it happened during a nasty argument we had years ago. She claimed it was just a one-time fling and that she's been loyal to me ever since. She admitted she had doubts about whether I was the father but never took a paternity test. She said she was happy seeing me happy and didn't want to have an abortion for the sake of our family. She also said she didn't tell me the truth to keep the peace. I told her I was divorcing and that I didn't want to be a part of our son's life. She started crying and begged me not to break our family apart. She insisted that I'm still his father and that I've been a wonderful father and husband. She asked me to forgive her and not let DNA destroy our lives. She continued begging, but I left immediately. Afterward, she began blowing up my phone with calls and messages. Initially, I decided not to tell anyone about what had happened, but I became so angry that I told everyone. Now, everyone is furious at my wife. Her parents have said they want nothing to do with her and have cut contact. My sister furiously called my soon-to-be ex and cursed her out. On the other hand, her brother and sister think I humiliated my wife and should have kept this between us instead of making it public. Yesterday, her sister called me and urged me to take my wife back and return to my son. I told her I don't have a son. She got angry, started cursing me and said I'm a weak, pathetic man. She told me no wonder my wife cheated on me and that I'm so insecure and weak that I had to go behind my wife's back to take a paternity test. She accused me of giving up on my son just because we don't share blood, and claimed that I'm the reason my wife is now alone and depressed. I hung up on her and instead called her husband to tell him everything. I even told him that her family's full of nut jobs and that maybe he should get a paternity test as well because he shouldn't trust them. He apologized on his wife's behalf and we ended a call. Now, I'm ignoring all calls from my wife and her sister. Now for the top comments before reading the update. Don't let DNA destroy our lives. Oh, it was the DNA that did the destruction. Damn, science. LMAO. Speaking of which, get an STD test. The cheater on the next update. Don't let an STD test destroy our lives. Damn crazy how DNAs just go around ruining marriages and destroying lives like that. Not the a-hole. Yep, those lying, cheating DNAs. The poor kid. Yeah, I really feel for the child here. At 5 years old, he has bonded with his father, who is now going to abandon him because of his mother's actions. That can mess a kid up for life. How do you explain to a 5-year-old why his daddy doesn't love him anymore? More importantly, how does Hopi just stop loving his 5-year-old? Now for the first update. I was absolutely shocked to see 10,000 comments on my post, and so many DMs when I checked it again yesterday. I'm thankful to everyone who reached out. I couldn't go through all the comments, but I took the time to read many of them. To those asking if I'm okay, I'm not, but I'll survive. Also, why are some people calling me misogynistic and saying I deserve to be cheated on? If your husband came to you and confessed to have a child outside of your marriage, wouldn't you curse him out? This isn't about gender at all. I decided to do the paternity test because my sister kept urging me to. She asked me multiple times, but I brushed it off. I never thought my wife would cheat on me, let alone get pregnant by another man. My sister is my best friend and has always looked out for me. She insisted I do the test because my son didn't look like me at all. I told her he looked like his mom, but she pushed me and I'm glad she did. She was heartbroken seeing me cry and angry at my wife. I must have hugged her for hours, crying, because I truly loved my son. But being around him reminded me of my wife's betrayal, which made the pain worse. After reading comments about how my son is a victim just like me, I decided not to cut him off completely right away because it might mentally scar him. I called my wife and she picked up right away. I told her I was coming over to meet my son. She cried and said she was glad I was coming. I asked her if her sister was still there and she said she was. I told her to make sure her sister didn't speak to me or I'd punch her filthy mouth. She assured me her sister wouldn't interact with me. When my son saw me, he was very happy and hugged me instantly. He asked where I had been, and I picked him up and I told him I had been working. I played with him for an hour and gently explained that I would be away frequently but would still visit and stay in touch. He didn't like the news, so to cheer him up, I told him I'd prepare a surprise for his birthday in December. I'm not sure what yet, but I'll figure it out. After we went outside to play, I talked to my wife. She immediately latched onto me, hugged me, and started crying. She begged me to come back to her and not give up on our family over a mistake. She said she had wanted to abort the pregnancy but didn't because I was happy. She insisted she had been loyal to me ever since. I got even angrier and grabbed her arm, yelling that she destroyed me and our son. I told her that when our son finds out the truth, he won't love her as much as he does now. I said, I came in you every single night. Where did it all go? But a random man comes in you once and you got pregnant? We both know I'm not infertile. I told her I wanted to tell everyone we know the truth. Her friends, her friends' friends, the whole neighborhood, every single member of her family, even those living in China or people she hasn't spoken to in years. I even wanted to tell all her future partners. She started crying and shaking. I told her I wouldn't do it, not because of her, but because it would hurt the innocent child and ruin him. I said, don't misunderstand. I'm doing this for him, not for you. She said I was the love of her life and that she couldn't live without me. She vowed to wait until I calmed down and fight for me. She said she wouldn't let her family break apart over one mistake. She promised to give me as many children as I wanted, that she would get paternity tests for all of them, and started kissing me desperately. I pushed her away and said, you're delusional. You're acting like you've ruined my car or something. I would have forgiven you for anything else, but this is a betrayal to your husband and your own child. I yelled at her sister to get her professional help because she's losing it. Before she could say anything, I left because I wanted her to feel as miserable as possible. After I returned, I texted my wife saying I would visit frequently for my son, but that I'm only thinking about him, nothing else. I told her not to make things worse than they already are, to think about him and to be a good mother. I'm now living with my sister who has been fully supportive. She hugs me until I calm down, even if it takes hours. I'll start divorce proceedings soon. I know I'm his father, so I probably won't escape child support, and even if I do, I feel a moral obligation to be in his life. As for my wife and her sister, screw them both. They're both awful, and maybe it runs in their blood. For her, it's just a mistake. For you, it's years of lying. That's the part that really pisses me off. Calling the biggest betrayal just a mistake. Makes me think she's not contrite and just manipulating to get him back, versus really soaking in the gravity of how big her mistake ruined the lives of the two people she should love the most. Sorry you're going through this. One thing that bothered me about your post is that you said you're not cutting off your son right away. Decide if you're in or out on being a father and act accordingly. It will be worse for the child if you let him become more attached to you and then leave. If he's on the birth certificate, he can't just wash his hands off the child, even if it isn't his. Second update. It's been a month since I found out that my son isn't biologically mine. I've been seeking therapy and I've realized that I love my son deeply, even though he isn't biologically mine. I've always loved him and I always will. In my anger, I called my wife names, which I didn't intend to, but she betrayed me. As for my sister-in-law, she definitely deserved it, because she called me weak and treated me like crap after I found out the truth. After a lot of therapy sessions, I've come to realize that it's better to make peace with everyone and focusing on being in my child's life. I don't know why I keep getting angry messages accusing me of going too far, saying my situation is fake or insisting that I should forgive my wife. I agree that I was angry, but betrayal like this is far worse than just cheating. In any case, I'm posting again because I've truly tried my best. I talked things over with my sister-in-law. Thankfully, she wasn't hostile. We apologized to each other, and while we still don't like each other, we've made peace. I visit my home every few days. My sister-in-law, my wife, and my son still live in the house. I'm tolerating all of this because of my child. I just want a clean divorce from my wife. But I also want to stay in my child's life because I'm the only father he has ever known. Even though he's still young, I don't know how or when to tell him the truth. Every time I visit to spend time with my son, my wife always hugs me. I've stopped pushing her away because it never works. I just let her hug me and vent. She keeps apologizing and saying how sorry she is and how much she wants me back. I always tell her I'm only there for my son. She cries but thankfully doesn't say much in front of him. 3 days ago, when I visited my son, I absolutely adore him. He's always so excited whenever I come to see him. I told my wife that I've hired a lawyer, but only when my son wasn't around. My wife freaked out and begged me not to split our family apart. She said that while my son might not have my DNA, he is still my son and she is still my wife. She insisted that we could make things work, live happily, and that she would give me as many children as I wanted. I left after she vented. I'm still angry at my wife and sister-in-law, but I've been able to control my anger. Her family keeps calling me, telling me I should give my wife another chance and that she'll be a good wife to me. When I refused, they said there's a chance I might not be able to see my son. That scared me. I love my son deeply, even though he isn't mine biologically and he loves me as his father. But what if I'm not allowed to see him? What if they turn the situation against me? That's what I'm worried about. This isn't about me, it's about my child's mental health. I fear they're trying to weaponize the situation and I don't want that to happen. Am I being unfair to myself if I stay with my wife for my son's sake and help him? There are horrible people for using your son as a hostage, to blackmail you into keeping their cheating daughter as your wife. You need to keep those texts and send them to your lawyer. Show them as proof that your wife is not fit to parent a child if she can use the child to blackmail you to do what she wants. My issue right now is not about getting back at my wife, my sister-in-law, or her family. I want to avoid fighting with them. I want them to realize that we can't keep fighting with each other, not for us, but for our son, their grandchild. I'm still angry, but I've decided to approach things peacefully and try to get along with them after my therapy sessions. That said, I hate every one of them, except my wife. I still love her, but I also hate her for her betrayal. I'm going above and beyond for my son. That's my priority. Putting my anger aside, my son doesn't deserve this much pain. He's so young, just 5 years old. I want a clean divorce and to co-parent, but my wife and her family are making everything so difficult for all of us. What kind of mother is she? She doesn't seem to care about our son, she just wants me back. Even if I decided to stay with her, our son would eventually realize that I'm not his biological father and that his parents hate each other. If he weren't so young, I would tell him the truth myself. But right now, there's no way to handle this without my wife agreeing to cooperate. I don't want conflict, but I also think it's unavoidable. I don't really know how to help my son in this situation. You have to fight for him, or you have to back away. This middle-of-the-road approach is how you end up trapped in a loveless marriage, as she's already willing to cheat and getting stepped on by your sister-in-law. Make your choice, but don't stay there with her family knowing that you are basically being forced into a situation like this, and your sister-in-law able to hold him against you. As much as it may hurt OP, he should leave the kid for the kid's sake. I know people will jump at me for saying this, but this is the best option for OP as well as the kid. OP's soon-to-be ex-wife and her family will continue to use the kid as a pawn to drag OP into staying into the relationship. And once OP leaves, she will use the kid to hurt OP. And in doing so, she will end up causing emotional damage to the kid. OP may try to use her blackmailing to get custody, but considering OP left the kid, they might use that against OP to portray him as someone who might leave the kid in the future. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband's dad and dad's wife that I will not change our daughter's name because it hurts the wife's feelings? My husband, 29 male, has parents who divorced when he was 2. His dad remarried 2 years later to his wife, Sharon. Sharon and my late mother-in-law, who passed away when my husband was 8, were on very bad terms. Sharon has said that my mother-in-law made her life hell, wished her dead, laughed when she suffered 3 back-to-back miscarriages, tried to get CPS to take custody away from father-in-law and her, and attempted to remove her from the picture entirely using CPS. Sharon claims the only reason my husband never called her anything other than Sharon and always saw her as an outsider is because of mother-in-law. However, father-in-law's own siblings have said this is not accurate. They said Sharon and mother-in-law simply disliked each other. While they acknowledged that mother-in-law was dismissive of Sharon's role at times and didn't regard her as an equal in parenting, they said mother-in-law was nowhere near as bad as Sharon and father-in-law claim. When my mother-in-law passed away, my husband's relationship with father-in-law and Sharon deteriorated significantly. He forbade them from attending the funeral, saying that if they tried to come, he would run away until he was placed with other family members. My husband told me this himself. Father-in-law and Sharon said they were afraid he would lash out at them, and since Sharon was pregnant at a time, they gave in. They claim my husband hates them for not being there, but it says that them following through and staying away was one of the better decisions they made. He hates that he had to yell and threaten to run away to stop them from insisting on attending. By the time we met in college, he had very little contact with them. In recent years, there has been slightly more contact, but it's still minimal. He told me the whole story about how rocky their relationship was, and I knew he never planned to be very close to them. Sharon calls my husband her son. She even introduced herself to me as his mom and was shocked that I knew she wasn't. I haven't met her or father-in-law much. I know my husband's extended family far better as he's much closer to them than to father-in-law, Sharon, or his half-siblings. I recently gave birth to our daughter and we named her after my mother-in-law. My husband did not invite father-in-law or Sharon to meet our daughter, but they found out about her name via social media and reached out to him to ask why. A couple of days ago, they approached me at the mall and asked me to talk to them. They told me they had found out about her name and wanted to know why we would do that to Sharon, asking how I could be okay with using my daughter to hurt Sharon's feelings. They said I should insist on changing the name, maybe to something after Sharon, since she has been here all this time, but definitely not a name that would hurt her feelings so much. I told them I would not change my child's name, just because it hurts Sharon's feelings. That's not even a consideration for us. I didn't want to hear more, so I left. However, since then, we've been inundated with texts from them calling me rude and disgusting for dismissing Sharon's feelings. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole, and hand this back to your husband to deal with. He's done a great job of putting them back in their place throughout his life, and this is just one more time. Not the a-hole. He is weighing what he does now, but he thinks cutting all contact is likely the best way forward because they don't bring joy to us. I love your Marie Kondo approach to them, lol. My husband really had that stick with him when he heard it. He said it should apply to relationships too. Because if relationships never bring you joy, then you know they aren't good for you. Am I the a-hole for leaving my boyfriend for no reason? Original post. I, 26 female, had been with my now ex-boyfriend Eric, 28 male, for 2 years. Overall, we had a good relationship. Nothing crazy until last night when everything completely fell apart. We were out at a bar with some of his friends, just having a normal night. Drinks, food, the usual. Eric and his friend Mark, 28 male, were joking around. And Eric made a comment about how much Mark was eating. He said something like, "Careful, Mark, you'll eat the whole damn bar." It seemed harmless at first, just typical guy humor. But then Mark looked right at me and said, "If only she knew." It was one of those moments where you instantly feel uncomfortable, like there's something going on behind your back. I had no idea what Mark was talking about, and the vibe at the table shifted immediately. Before I could even react, Eric exploded. He went off on Mark, yelling at him to shut the heck up. I'd even try to get physical. His other friends had to hold him back. Mark didn't react, which only seemed to make Eric angrier. The whole thing was incredibly awkward and we ended up leaving early. When we got back to my place, I couldn't stop thinking about that comment. I asked Eric, what did Mark mean by if only she knew? What don't I know? Instead of answering me, Eric lost it again. He started yelling at me, telling me to drop it and stop being paranoid. He dodged every question and got more angry each time I brought it up. I wasn't trying to pick a fight. I just wanted to know what was going on. It felt like there was something important being hidden from me, and I wasn't about to let it slide. But every time I asked, he became more defensive and angry. Eventually, he stormed out of my apartment. Since he doesn't live with me, I locked the door and called it a night. I didn't hear from him until this morning, and when I did, it was just more angry texts telling me to drop it and leave him alone. At that point, I was done. I'm not going to sit around and be treated like I'm crazy for asking a simple question. I texted him back saying we're done, that I need space, and if he can't be honest with me, then I don't want any part of this relationship. End of story. But here's where it gets worse. Eric has been going around to our mutual friends, telling them that I left him for no reason and making it seem like I'm the one who overreacted. Some of them have even reached out to me, saying I should have just let it go and that I'm blowing things out of proportion. I told them to mind their own business. None of them were there, none of them saw how he acted, and none of them have to live with a pit in their stomach that I've had since Mark's weird comment. I'm not going to stay in a relationship where I feel like something shady is going on behind my back. If Eric can't be straight with me after 2 years together, then what's the point? So Reddit, am I the a-hole for leaving him over this? Now for the top comments before reading the update. I get the distinct feeling that this is not the first time you've gotten on him about possible infidelity. You're right, sadly. A few months ago, he was staying out late when going out with friends. I asked him about it, and he stopped going out with his friends because you want this. You don't want me to be happy. Not the a-hole. Between the keeping secrets and the acting crazy, it sounds like this experience was the nail in the coffin from some previous red flags. Not the a-hole. You didn't leave for no reason. It sounds like it's good that you did. If they keep pushing, tell them to ask Eric what Mark meant. Maybe they'll see it for themselves. Nah, you're not the a-hole. Trusting your gut is important, and if he can't communicate, then you deserve better. Exactly. Not the a-hole. Eric's defensiveness and refusal to explain Mark's comments are huge red flags. You deserve honesty, and leaving a relationship where you feel something is off is completely valid. Trust your gut. You're not overreacting. Now for the update. I feel like I'm living in some kind of twisted nightmare, and the more I try to make sense of it, the worse it gets. Today, Mark called me while I was at work. I didn't expect him to call because he'd been ignoring me. I stepped outside to take the call, and he told me something I never could have prepared for in a million years. He said that Eric has been putting other men's emission into my food, drinks, skincare, products, shampoo, conditioner, and even my toothpaste. I'm not exaggerating. This is exactly what Mark told me. Apparently, Eric has been hooking up with random men, collecting their fluids in cups, and then using it in my meals and drinks, as if it were some kind of sick joke. Even as I write this, I'm still in complete disbelief. Who does that to someone? Mark said he found out about it a week ago, but for some reason, it took him that long to tell me. A whole week. I've been living my life, completely oblivious, trusting Eric, someone I loved, while this was happening behind my back. I feel so betrayed, disgusted, and violated. I asked Mark if he and Eric were having an affair, or if this was some sort of twisted thing between them. He swore they weren't, even making a gross comment about not wanting to touch Eric, because who knows what diseases he has. That made my stomach turn. I'm getting tested for everything now because I have no idea what's been in my body. When I got home, I went straight to the kitchen. Mark told me to check under the sink, and there they were, the cups, hidden behind the cleaning supplies. I lost it. I threw out everything in the kitchen and bathroom, even things I knew hadn't been touched. I don't care. Everything feels contaminated now. My home doesn't feel like a safe space anymore. Every time I walk into the kitchen, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I can't even function without my mind going to dark places, thinking about all the times I had no idea this was happening. I don't have any solid proof beyond Mark's words and those disgusting cups. and I feel so powerless. If nothing can be done about this, I honestly don't know how I'm going to cope. How is this even legal? How can someone get away with something so vile? I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. This whole thing is messing with my head in ways I can't even explain. I feel dirty, violated on such a deep level, and there's nothing I can do to undo it. My mom wants me to check into a hospital to make sure I'm okay mentally, and I'm honestly going to do it. I don't feel stable right now. I don't feel like myself. I'm scared I might hurt myself or someone else. The most confusing part is that Eric was eating the same food. He was consuming the contaminated food right alongside me. Was it some kind of kink? A power trip? I don't even know anymore. All I know is that the man I thought I knew, the man I loved, is a complete stranger to me now. I can't believe I've been living with someone capable of something so vile. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I don't know how I'm going to recover from this. How could he do this to me? I'm genuinely losing it. I'm a danger to myself, and I'm not going to be on here for a while. I'm checking myself into the hospital. It was only 2 days ago that you posted this. Go get all of the items you threw away out of the garbage and turn them into the police. There's your solid proof. You threw it away. And by the way, it is not legal. If those items are tested and come back positive, he is going to jail. Not a-hole. I hope you get justice. Everything I threw out was in the kitchen garbage, so it didn't get taken on trash day. My mom and cousin went to my house with the police to get it for evidence. I'm pressing charges against him. Next story. Am I the a-hole for being disgusted and just saying okay when my fiancé broke up with me? I, 28 female, had been with my fiancé Alex, 34 male, since 2020. We met at a friend's party, hit it off, and had been together ever since. He finished his doctorate in economics last year and started working at the university. I have a master's in media sciences and decided to start working instead of pursuing a PhD. Everything fell apart last Monday when Alex suddenly broke up with me. The past few months had been strange. He was making random demands and then dropping them immediately. For example, he suggested we repaint the dark green walls to white. When I asked why, he snapped. For Pete's sake. Forget it. I'd never mention it again. Another time, he got upset because I was lying on a couch under a blanket. I had cramps, accusing me of just sitting there watching Netflix, even though the house was spotless. When I tried to discuss it, he brushed it off as not a big deal. These incidents became more frequent. Every time I tried to communicate and figure out if something was wrong or if he was just stressed, he would insist everything was fine, but he clearly seemed angry. He found something to complain about constantly: the apartment, my clothes, me, his work. I decided to give him some space, but even that seemed to be wrong. When I told him I'll be helping my parents with some repairs for a few days, he got upset because he wanted to renovate our apartment too. Last Monday, I received a text saying we needed to talk. I had a feeling this was coming, and I had made peace with the idea that it might be over. When I got home, he was sitting on a couch and didn't even wait for me to take off my jacket before saying, "I want to break up." Then he launched into a rant. He said he resented me because I didn't pursue my academic career further, even though I was capable. He admitted he had kept his feelings to himself because he didn't want to upset me. He then brought up the fact that, while he was a PhD student making very little money, I had started earning more. He felt like I had a final say financially, even though I never imposed that on him. It was his own perception, and he resented it. He continued saying he hated the paint color, the couch, and even our crockpot. Then, he revealed that he had been accepted into a better PhD program overseas, but turned it down to stay because I had already started my job. He said I ruined his life because he saw a friend in that program thriving and felt like he had sacrificed too much for our relationship. He claimed I had too much control over his life and that he hated the idea that I could screw him over financially, even though I have no idea what he meant by that. He also said he was frustrated that all his friends liked me and wouldn't let him vent about me. After all that, he simply said, "I'm done." I was floored, but after hearing that rant, I was mostly disgusted. I had already accepted that our relationship might end, but his outburst left me with no doubt. I looked at him and said, "Okay." That response sent him to a rage. He said this was exactly what he meant, that it was horrible that we had been together for 4 years, and all I could say was, okay. I asked if he wanted to stay in the apartment while he figured out his next steps, and he accused me of holding the apartment over him and began ranting again. So I just left. I told my parents and they were as confused as I was. My dad suggested I talk to our landlord to see what options I had. I can cover the rent myself with no problem, as Alex only contributed to utilities and a few subscriptions. To be clear, I never had an issue with our financial situation. I saw Alex chasing his dreams, and that was more important to me than splitting expenses 50-50. I made good money and was happy at my job. I never saw it as a burden. I always believed that my money was our money because we were building a life together. Of course, I had my own savings and fun money, but I never cared about a split as long as he was working towards something meaningful. Now, Alex is still angry. He alternates between robotic texts about logistics and being a seething jerk, complaining about everything. I'm no longer hurt. I'm just nauseated by him at this point. Should I have reacted differently? Edit. Thank you for all your opinions. It felt good to get this off my chest. Just to clarify, I don't feel like a victim. It's clear that something changed and our relationship went bad. He acted like an a-hole, but that's the extent of it. It's obvious something is going on with him, but he doesn't want me to be a part of whatever it is, and I have to respect that. Now, I just need to disentangle myself from him legally, and then I'll be left with the ugly green walls. I might also adopt a cat, since my ex was really allergic. Not a-hole. Dude basically said he hates you and everything about you. What are you supposed to do? Beg for his love when you can find someone who'll give it to you readily? Nah. Sorry this happened and that you were blindsided, but this will be a good thing in the long run. On to the next. For what it's worth, he sounds jealous, insecure, and emotionally stunted. If what you've written is how things played out, then you dodged a huge bullet. He was basically doing his own renditions of 10 things I hate about you. I don't know. I mean, he wants to break up with me. Why would I plead? It is done. OP, you are incompatible. You are successful while he is a loser. PhD but can't communicate. Econ major but didn't know there is no money in the university. Resents you for his decisions. You dodged a nuclear crazy one. I think working in the uni is really admirable and is really hard. Professors and researchers are amazing, and I think there should be more money in academia. That is why I never minded being the breadwinner. Dude basically hates himself for decisions he took without ever consulting you. He chose his comforts, but now since others seem in a better position, he is venting on you and making you the culprit. Not a-hole, but your man has a little brain and doesn't know what to do with it. I would have supported him if he wanted to move away. I don't know if we would have stayed together because LDRs are hard, but I would have been 100% supportive. Last story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to give my brother a character letter to help his court trail after what he did to a friend's daughter? So I, 28 female, have a brother, 31 male, who is looking at serving time in prison for relations with a minor, 14 female, who is one of my friend's daughter. This has been going on for months as evidence states, and we only found out a few weeks ago. When I found out about this, I had a discussion with my friend and apologized for what happened. But understandably, she wants space. I have also cut off my brother, as this whole situation is just disgusting to me. My parents, however, have stayed by his side and are trying to say the only reason he did what he did is because he has autism and didn't know what he was doing was wrong. Despite them being shown text messages where he states himself that what he was doing was bad and he could be sent to prison for it. However, after they spoke to my brother's lawyer, he stated that we could each write up a character letter to be presented for him in court, so the judge can have better understanding of who he is beside the incident. But I refused because I don't think he deserves it. I'm currently 6 months pregnant and I don't want my daughter to be around or grow up with a man like my brother. I've spoken to my husband about this for another opinion, and he agrees with me not submitting a character letter. But we are thinking of talking to the children that my brother was around in the family, just to make sure that he doesn't done anything to them. My mother is dying and she says she doesn't want to pass while her son is serving time in prison for something that, in her words, wasn't that bad. Both her and my father are pressuring me to do this, and seeing them so upset is hard for me. But whenever I even think about doing it, it makes me sick. I just wanted to ask for everyone else's opinion on what I should do. Me and my brother were extremely close up until this point, which I think is making this harder for me. Should I cut out my parents too? Should I make the letter? Not the a-hole. I didn't even need to read past the first few sentences. People like him don't deserve remorse. Nor do they need people minimizing their actions as it wasn't too bad. For who? The victim? The child that was groomed by their adult son? OP, 100% not the a-hole, and if necessary, go low or no contact with those who are supportive of your brother. Make it clear to your mom that any character statement you give will make it explicitly clear that brother's autism is not and will never be an excuse. That he has full mental faculties and ability to make legal and moral choices, as well as the fact he knows damn well that what he did is wrong. I'm autistic. Anyone with autism incapable of monitoring themselves is the legal responsibility of those caring for them. If your brother truly was incapable of understanding what he was doing, then he should be living with your parents, under constant supervision, with heavy limits to online facilities and his phone/search history regularly checked. Either he's capable of being a disgusting offender all by himself and has hidden it all this time because he knows what he's done is wrong, or your parents willingly and knowingly enabled him to rape a minor. Because that's what it is. She's beneath the age of consent. See if you can get hold of the text messages where he admits he knew it was wrong to hand in to the police. People like him will not stop until they are stopped. Your friend's daughter is, so far, the most accessible victim he could get his hands on. If everyone outside family keeps their children away from him, he'll turn on the kids he does have access to. Not the a-hole. Update. Grown man ruining my son's life. Please help me ruin his. Original post. I'm living in hell right now and need ideas. My son just turned 18 and is disabled. He needs and takes multiple medications and requires support at school. He does well in some settings and is on track to graduate and pursue trade school with support, and we're so proud of him. He is extremely impressionable, a little socially awkward, and desperate for friends. For years we've struggled because he gives away his possessions, gets into bad situations, like someone offering to sell him rocks at a park, him thinking they're collectible gemstones, only to freak out when he realizes they're drugs, and is easily bullied. He will do anything to be liked, which breaks my heart. We're working on this in therapy and with trusted adults, but it's a slow process. Now onto the grown man. This guy is 28 years old. Let's call him Quentin. He's frequently homeless, often sleeping in a tent in parks. Occasionally, he gets a voucher from our city to stay in a motel. He has 2 pit bulls, neither spayed or neutered, which he leaves in a tent or motel room when he works his fast food job. I have compassion for his situation, but not when it involves my son. It started with Quentin asking my son to watch his dogs in the park while he worked. My son, thrilled to have a friend and eager to help, agreed. He loves animals, so he'd spend 8+ hours a day or night alone in a park watching these dogs. He began asking if he could take dog food, toys, and blankets from our house for Quentin's dogs. At first we said yes because I appreciated that he wanted to help the dogs. But when we said no, he started taking things anyway. Things escalated a few months ago when Quentin told my son that now that he's 18, he didn't have to stay with us and could stay with him instead. For weeks, my son was sleeping in a tent with Quentin and the dogs or roughing it in the park. Quentin gave him beer and weed. My son would watch the dogs for entire shifts while Quentin worked. Quentin even told him he'd help him get a tent and vouchers too. The police are sympathetic, especially because of my son's disabilities and medical issues, but he's 18. The school is supportive, but with graduation approaching, there's only so much they can do. And again, he's legally an adult. We never pursued medical conservatorship because things were going relatively well before now, and we don't take removing civil liberties lightly. In the past week, Quentin got another motel room and messaged my son to come stay with him. My son went. He sat in the room watching the dogs while Quentin worked, likely smoking and drinking when Quentin was home. My son responded to our texts, but insisted he's an adult and can go where he wants. During this time, he missed a week of medication, school, part of his part-time job, and an important medical appointment. Being Quentin's friend has taken priority. He feels good helping Quentin. It even said, "Quentin is like a brother to me. He's the best brother I've ever had." Quentin's own family has kicked him out. They are nearby but clearly done with him. No idea who watches the dogs when my son isn't available. Earlier this week, my son gave Quentin his bike, saying he needs it more than me. My son came home yesterday in a complete psychiatric crisis from being unmedicated and likely high and or drunk. His medical issues were also exacerbated. He was banging his head on a concrete floor, and when we called emergency services, he spit at the police. So they restrained him and put a spit hood on him. It was horrific and he was begging for help. We're unsure when he'll be stable enough to come home and may need a medical procedure. He was coherent today, crying and apologizing, but remains 100% certain Quentin is his friend. I feel terrible because at 18, it's normal for him to start building his own life and friendships. I look forward to that day. He does have other, more age-appropriate friends, but they have busier lives and responsibilities. They aren't available 24/7. Quentin is, and my son loves the feeling of being needed when his phone pings with a message from his friend. How can I make this man's life miserable, or at least make it too uncomfortable or risky for him to keep hanging with my son? Important note, I do not want to harm or stress the dogs. It's not their fault, and my son would never forgive me. Now for the top advice before reading the update. Intervene now, before Quentin gets your son on a path of using harder drugs. Because everything about this situation screams that's where the situation is headed. Intervention in a serious way should have been executed way before this. Even sending the boy to live with distant relatives and blocking Quentin's number on any phone. This is heartbreaking and no good can come of it. Sounds like you might need to pursue medical conservatorship, which I know you don't want to do, but it sounds like you definitely have grounds, and it's the lesser of two evils at this point. I don't see things ending up well without intervention. Thank you for this, and others who prompt me to reconsider conservatorship. I called a lawyer on Monday. I had already done research and collected that info, but had a lot of hope that once sheltered work started up and he had less free time, it might not be necessary. Pay someone to be your son's friend that's more of a caretaker? Honestly, this guy sounds at the very least like a scammer. Sometimes the only way people into deep in one scam is a second scam. It's sad, but there's literally a bot on r/scams for recovery scams. Basically, people promising to recover your loss for some fee. It's not great, but if you could afford someone to offer better friendship and then point out that his old friend is lame, it'll be like positive peer pressure. Maybe help the person could help them join appropriate opportunities for new friendship, then phase out. This is another great idea, and I appreciated the comments below it here in the thread. I have reached out to some young adults older than him that might serve as mentors or fitness coaches. Hang out with him, work out, play basketball. Build positive connections with people who don't wish him ill. Thank you for this. I have a few possibilities here in our area. Update. A few months ago, I came here asking for tips to help get a man named Quentin out of my son's life. I'm super grateful for all the ideas and the many kind words. As of today and for the last 3 months, my son is happy and healthy. We found a transitional living house for him with 5 other young men and 2 house managers and a dog. He's learning how to adult, cooking, cleaning, and preparing for a job. The program includes therapy, daily gym sessions, yoga, skateboarding. Truly a dream come true. The house is about 40 minutes away from where Quentin lives. My son now feels he has friends, a sense of purpose, and independence. He's busy and learning so much, and the program also includes job training. Before this happened, I followed as much of your advice as I could. I contacted the manager at Quentin's workplace and the motel he occasionally stays at. I told them Quentin was allowing a disabled teenager to stay with him and was giving him, and other teens, alcohol. The manager, a local small business owner, took my information seriously. I also went to the motel and pointed out the sign stating all guests must have ID, which my son does not. I reminded the manager of this policy and said I'd contact corporates if it wasn't being followed. I also started calling the non-emergency police line when Quentin was camping at a park after closing hours or leaving his dogs unsupervised during the day. The police would move him along. Someone gave me the brilliant advice to become Quentin's best friend and show up all the time. So I did. If Quentin wanted to see my son, he got to see me too. I showed up at the park, at his work, and near the motel. I even prepared flyers to distribute around the neighborhood, informing residents about the tent, the camping, and the unsupervised, unneutered pit bulls near the playground. Quentin became increasingly upset. He accused me of stalking him and said he was going to call the police. I politely encouraged him to do so, telling him I'd love to share more with the authorities about what he was doing with my son and other vulnerable young people. I told him, if you want to be in my son's life, I'll be in yours. It's up to you. I felt so bold after all your advice and encouragement. I was ready for the long haul. In the meantime, we found a lawyer and tapped into resources to find my son some job training, since he genuinely wants to feel grown up and helpful. Through a local agency, he worked for a few weeks at a drugstore, stocking, cleaning, and assisting customers. It kept him busy and gave him confidence, which slowly started pulling him away from Quentin. Eventually, Quentin either got sick of seeing me or became worried about losing his job. The motel he stayed at stopped letting him stay, forcing him to use another location much farther away. With a longer commute to work and more obstacles, he must have decided my son wasn't worth the trouble. He stopped contacting him altogether. Thank you so much for all your ideas. As his mom, I was so focused on fixing things from my son's perspective that I didn't know how to deal with Quentin effectively. Your advice was invaluable. A huge thank you from the mom of a happy, healthy, busy, and purposeful young adult son. Glad it worked out for you and your son. You did great and are a much better person than I am. I would not have handled it as well and would have done some bad things to keep him away. Great mother, and hope this progress continues for you and your son. Good for you. You made a difference where so many fail. My son needs the same program. Please share it with me so we can save him too. You remind me of my mom and the lengths she took to keep her kids happy and safe. She died 24 years ago now on September 29th, 2000. The trajectory of my life would have been vastly different if I had her in my life instead of her dying while I was young. I think anyone should be immensely proud to have you as their parent. Maybe Quentin would have ended up different if they had someone like you as their parents and role model, but who knows? This comment has me crying. So kind of you, and thank you for the comparison to your mom. I'm so glad you had her. Last story. Update. My husband and I took in my best friend and her 3 young children, and I'm regretting it. Original post. My 30 female best friend, 29 female, recently lost her husband, home, car, and all sources of income. Her husband suddenly passed away, and he was the only one working while she stayed at home with their 1-year-old twins and 4-year-old. They had nowhere to go, so it took them in until she can save up enough to get an apartment. There was no life insurance. My husband isn't happy that they are here. He has told me that he does not like my friend at all, claiming that she has taken me away from him and taken over his home. He is paranoid that she is stealing our things when we aren't home and wants to put locks in our bedroom and office doors, as well as install cameras in those rooms. Today, my friend went into our bedroom to smoke a cigarette in our patio and take a moment to herself away from her kids while we weren't home. She called me to let me know she was going out on a patio, but my husband started freaking out when I told him. Now, he says he feels like he needs to get an apartment because he doesn't feel safe and feels like he no longer has a space in our home where they don't have access. It breaks my heart that he hates my friend so much when she hasn't done anything wrong. She's just going through one of the toughest times in her life. But I don't know if I'm being too trusting of my friend and inconsiderate of his feelings, or if he's being too paranoid. Now for the top advice before reading the update. I think there needs to be discussion of a timeline for when she is leaving. He agreed to take her in the short term. At least that is the impression I got reading this. So he needs to chill a bit about them living in his pace. That being said, suddenly having another woman he doesn't like and 3 kids in the house is understandably not awesome. I think the solution is to set a timeline for when she is leaving. Help her find a place as her friend, but stick to the timeline. And set some boundaries about what areas of the house she and her kids have access to and which are off limits. Just because someone is staying at your house doesn't mean they get to treat it like it's their house. The husband is right for not wanting Opie's friend in their bedroom, bathroom, and office. If she can't show immediate respect for that, she needs to be kicked to the curb. I'm sure she'll feel much more confined and restricted at a shelter. Your friend is taking advantage of you and she needs to go. How is she contributing? Is she keeping the house clean? Is she cooking some meals? Paying for some groceries or chipping in for utilities? Understandable that her situation is sad, but this isn't your or your husband's responsibility. You did a nice thing and she's taking it for granted. I guarantee this is going to put a strain on your marriage. It sounds like it has already. It's not your responsibility to take care of somebody else's family. I would tell her she has a set amount of time and stick to that. It might hurt your friendship, but you need to decide what's more important. Friendship versus marriage. She is not taking us for granted at all. She keeps the house clean, cleans up after herself and her children, has assistance for groceries and diapers, waiting to get approved for other assistance. This is the only problem we've had with her in the months she's been here. Her situation is heartbreaking, especially for her 3 children. If it was just her, we would have said no. My husband and I were on the same page with letting her stay. We agreed to 8 months, but I do agree that we need to set a specific move-out date. Maybe I'm a mean friend, but I'd never allow a friend to stay with my husband, our kids, and I. There's a boundary that you don't cross. Why didn't she have any single friends to help her? Because every person she went to said no to helping them, just like everyone else on this Reddit post said they do. My husband and I could not in good conscience let our babies be homeless. Now 40 updates a month later. This update is a few weeks overdue, but a lot has happened. It's hard to fit every single detail of a situation into one post, especially while trying to respect my friend's privacy during such a rough time. However, I took a lot of your advice. I apologized to my husband and asked him what boundaries he needed and what changes were necessary for him to feel more comfortable. We had this conversation before my friend moved in, but things turned out so differently than expected. I realized I was putting my friend before my husband, and it was a harsh wake-up call. My husband wasn't thinking about leaving me, but he was definitely unhappy. I'm glad we had this talk because being on the same page has made us both a lot happier. We sat down and talked to my friend, and it went great. She apologized for going into our bedroom when we weren't home, admitted it was unacceptable, and promised it would never happen again. I told her the bedroom and study were off limits, no exceptions. I also made it clear that her children needed to keep their toys in the playroom we set up for them and not spread them all over the house. She completely agreed to all of this. We changed the locks on the bedroom and study doors, added cameras, and installed a safe for valuables. Most importantly, we told her she needed to find a job and arrange daycare for her children as soon as possible, with a hard deadline of April 1st. She took the whole conversation really well and admitted that she needed this push to move forward and build a life for herself and her kids. 5 days later, she got a job and found daycare for her children. The energy in the house has completely shifted. My husband and I are spending more time alone together in our home, and all of our boundaries have been respected. To everyone who said they'd never take in a friend and her 3 kids, that's exactly why she had nowhere else to go. Everyone else said no. It's been rough on all of us, but my husband and I are now confident in our decision to help her, especially now that we both feel heard and respected. My husband has also worked on his anger toward my friend and feels more at ease interacting with her and coexisting in the same space. It helps that he sees she's taking our rules and deadlines seriously and acting accordingly. Reddit obliterated me, and while I don't agree with kicking her out, I appreciate the brutal honesty that helped me realize I wasn't backing my husband the way I vowed to. When I was young, my parents took in my dad's coworker whose husband had left her. Initially, she could stay as long as she needed, but eventually they did the same thing and said they needed to see her working towards getting back to being independent. She was in the Air Force with my dad at a time, so she had good options. Still a lifelong friend. Love this successful story, even though it wasn't all great all the time. Makes me hopeful that our friendship will continue for another 10 years after this. Thank you for sharing. I think you handled this great, and wow, so wonderful you can help your friend and the 3 kids. It takes one person to make a difference in someone's life. If my extra room can make a huge impact on their lives, then absolutely let them use it. But boy, have boundaries and house rules made things so much tolerable, lol. Update. Am I in the wrong for telling my ex-husband that our kids are justified in feeling like they don't have a father? Original post. I'm 33 and have 2 kids, 12 and 8. I divorced their dad when I discovered he was cheating on me with a mom from our younger son's school group. Despite that betrayal, I agreed to shared custody because I wanted my kids to grow up with their father in their lives. However, since the divorce, he's only been around when he's picking them up for visits. He often goes out with his stepchildren, but rarely includes our kids, claiming those outings are spur of the moment and can't always include them. Eventually, I stopped pushing, but I've always thought it was unfair that he keeps his distance from our children's lives. Recently, I decided to upgrade my older son's computer, and he asked if we could give his old one to his cousin, my brother's son. My brother has been a huge support for my kids. He's always available to take them to their school events when I can't, and often takes them out to the park or on trips when I'm busy. My ex, on the other hand, is rarely available for them. Anytime I ask him to help with an activity, he has an excuse. He's out of town or swamped with work. Ironically though, whenever his stepkids need something, he's there. Once he even argued with his stepkid's father at a school event, insisting he had a right to be there. When my ex found out I gave the computer to my nephew, he got upset. He complained that if I had money to spare on a gift like that, I should have forgiven 2 months of child support he'd missed, since his finances were tight with a new baby. He added that if I could give away a computer, I should have gifted it to either his kids or his stepkids, who shared just one computer among the 3 of them. I told him my finances were none of his business, and that I owed nothing to his stepchildren. Then his wife jumped into the conversation, accusing me of spoiling my son by giving him a new computer and of being petty for letting my son bring it to their house, claiming it was just to show off in front of his step-siblings. I told her she had no right to speak to me that way or question my decisions. I added that I allow my kids to see their father so they can grow up with him in their lives, not so she can interfere with how I parent. My ex was offended, but I told him this whole situation could have been avoided if his wife hadn't inserted herself where she doesn't belong. After that, things seemed to calm down until last week. I went to pick up the kids, and my ex was visibly upset. He explained that he'd tried reading a bedtime story to our youngest. At home, he still likes to be read to before bed, usually by me, his brother or my brother. And when none of us are around, he listens to audiobooks. Apparently, my ex wanted to make an effort to connect, so he offered to read to him, but our son turned him down, saying he didn't need him for that because he could do it himself. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet, and it hit him hard. The next day, my ex offered to take our older son to basketball practice, but he replied that he'd be going with his dad. He quickly corrected himself and said, "Uncle." That made my ex even angrier, and when I came to pick up the kids, he confronted me about it. I told him that if our kids feel like they don't have a father, he has only himself to blame. He tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I was the one pushing him away from his role. I told him it's up to him to show up for his kids. It's not something I can do for him. I reminded him he was the one who broke our family and has chosen to be more involved with his stepkids than with his own children. I told him not to kid himself. The kids are growing up, and they're starting to see the reality of who he is as a father. If he keeps this up, he can't expect much from them in the future. After that exchange, his mom called me. While she's always been polite to me, I felt the need to say that I would have appreciated the same concern from her when she supported her son's affair, knowing her grandchildren were losing their father in the process. She hung up, and we haven't spoken since. My brother advised me that I had every right to express how I feel, but he suggested that maybe this discussion shouldn't have happened in front of the kids. Later, my ex texted me saying that if I weren't so difficult, he'd spend more time with them. I told him his duty as a father doesn't depend on whether I'm easy or not, and he knows I've never prevented him from seeing the kids. The truth is, when he has to choose, he prefers outings with his stepkids over his own children, and that's something only he can change. Now for the top comments before reading the updates. You can only do so much, OP, and don't let him off the hook for any child support. The fact that it's stretching his budget is a him problem, not a you problem. And I agree with your brother that that conversation should have not happened in front of the kids. But if I understand correctly, your ex chose the time and place, not giving you much choice in the matter. Not the a-hole. I love how if she had extra money, she should forgive child support. But him already knowing money was tight wasn't a reason to not have another kid. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet. Your kid is ruthless. Good for him. Not the a-hole. 8-year-olds can be ruthless. They seriously don't hold back. They understand so much more at that age. First update. First, I want to thank all of you. I didn't expect to receive so much advice, and I never thought this app would be so useful. It's not very popular in my country. Now back to the topic. My ex sent me messages saying he wanted to resolve things, stop arguing and talk. I agreed. He came to my house and we didn't beat around the bush. We went straight to the point. He asked if I really thought he was a bad father. I replied that, looking back, I never would have chosen him to be the father of my children. He said it wasn't easy for him, and I answered that it wasn't easy for me either, because I've been taking on both his role and mine. He told me he couldn't leave his stepchildren without a father because he had already broken their family. I replied that in doing so, he left his own children without a father. He started crying and told me it was my fault, saying that when the infidelity happened, I refused to forgive him or go to couples therapy. I kept telling him things that, I'll admit, were unkind, but none of them were lies. He asked me if I felt sorry for him given his current state, and I said no. He told me he didn't think I could be so cruel. I replied that when I changed jobs, pulled my kids out of school 2 months before the term ended, moved houses, and watched him disappoint our kids over and over again, any empathy I might have felt had turned into apathy. He left after that. His mother called me as saying she knew what I had told her son. She said he hadn't stopped crying and that she didn't understand how I could carry so much hatred and hurt him like that. She told me I should just get over it. I answered, with all due respect, what I said wasn't out of hatred but truth. If your son is crying, it's because he's finally facing the consequences of his actions. Maybe instead of worrying about how he feels now, you should have taught him how to take responsibility and treat people with respect. She said I didn't know what it was like to feel a mother's love and see a child suffer. I replied that I do understand because I have 2 children who cry over a living father. 2 children who see their dad being a father to other kids when he doesn't have time to be a father to them. She said he was sorry, and I told her not to put words in his mouth and to stop calling me about anything related to her son. I hung up. I wanted to cry so badly, but I'm a damned mother, and I don't have time for that. I want my kids to feel safe, loved, and strong enough to not need anyone, not even me, to be themselves. Last Thursday, I took my kids to their cousin's birthday party hosted by my ex-sister-in-law. I still have a good relationship with her. She was the one who told me about the infidelity and that her mother was encouraging it. My ex showed up alone and irritated. My kids kept their distance from him. They kissed his hand but then ignored him completely. My ex-mother-in-law told the kids they should show more respect to their father. My eldest replied that he doesn't show respect for me since he and his partner talk badly about me. I scolded my son, not for what he said but for how he addressed his grandmother. I told him it was wrong to eavesdrop on private conversations and repeat them. Then I asked him to gather his things because we were leaving. My ex-mother-in-law asked me not to leave, saying the kids were having fun and we could resolve this as adults. She asked my ex what he had said, and he claimed not to remember. I told her I didn't care. She said we should be good parents. I replied that to be good parents, you need to be good people first. My ex was getting agitated. My ex-mother-in-law asked why we couldn't have a civilized co-parenting relationship. I told her everything I've mentioned here about his free will to see the kids and how the second custody agreement isn't working since he only sees them some weekends. My ex didn't want to discuss it, saying he had too many kids at home. My ex-mother-in-law told him the only kids who should feel comfortable are his, and the comfort of the others should be provided by their biological father. My ex wanted to end the conversation because his mother was scolding him for being a careless father. He also said it was my fault. I asked him to clarify how it was my fault. You can see the kids whenever you want. What more do you want? He started yelling, claiming I was only being petty because I didn't really need the money since I earned more than him and had fewer kids to feed. I told him I wouldn't continue the conversation and that I'd show him what being uncivilized looks like by filing for the overdue child support payments. His mother asked what I meant by overdue payments. I explained that he was 3 months behind. She was furious, slapped him, and demanded to know what he had done with the money for his children. He answered, I couldn't let JR miss out on attending the same school as my son. I didn't want him to feel inferior. My ex-mother-in-law said she couldn't believe it, and they started arguing. I left. For context, my youngest son attends a private school, and my ex pays for his stepson to attend the same school. Yesterday, my ex-mother-in-law came over and said she would pay the overdue fees. She brought the money in cash. I knew my ex would be furious. Here's some context. My ex-mother-in-law doesn't work, doesn't own anything herself, and lives with my ex-sister-in-law. However, she does have significant savings from her inheritance. If she pays the tuition, my ex knows there won't be much left for him when she passes, even though she's still healthy. He's been asking her for years to invest some of that money in his business ideas, but she's always refused. My ex's retaliation was not picking up the kids this weekend. Yesterday, my ex-sister-in-law called me. She doesn't know all the details yet, but apparently my ex's 15-year-old stepson punched him in the mouth. She said she'll let me know exactly what happened once she finds out. And before anyone asks, the new custody agreement will likely take a year to finalize. The court says the overdue payments are the priority, and the rest can wait. We have more urgent cases. At least his mama finally got some sense her son is a POS. He obviously fed her a line of BS when she was defending him. He's her baby boy. He would never do no wrong, etc., etc. I'm glad he got exposed. When the evil mother-in-law turns on her spoiled child, you know he was 100% wrong. It's not even a question of perspective anymore. The chef's kiss was being punched by the stepson he prioritized his own kids over. Bet he feels utterly ridiculous now. He was his mom's affair partner. No matter what he does, those kids will always hate his guts. Second update. As I mentioned earlier, my ex's stepson had an altercation with him because my ex refused to let him go out. Now I have more details. My ex's stepson had plans to go bowling with some friends. His biological father had already given him permission and money for the outing. However, when he told his mother, she said he couldn't go because they needed him to stay home and watch his younger siblings. My ex and his wife had planned an outing and needed someone to stay with the kids. This led to an argument. The boy raised his voice to his mother and my ex stepped in to demand that he respect her. The boy replied that he wasn't his father. Trying to maintain authority, my ex told him that as long as he lived under his roof, he had to follow his rules. The boy ignored him and turned away. My ex followed him and touched his shoulder to get his attention. At that moment, the boy turned around, punched him, and shouted that he wasn't his father and could never compare to him. The mother scolded him for his behavior, but the boy, still angry, shouted back that he hated her. This version was shared by my ex and his wife with my ex-mother-in-law. My sister-in-law later related to me. They went to see my ex-mother-in-law to try to gain her sympathy and convince her to take care of the kids, the two stepchildren and the baby, so they could go out. However, my ex-mother-in-law told them she would not take care of the children. When I spoke to my ex, he mentioned he was dealing with family issues and claimed that the boy's biological father was turning the boy against him. He didn't give me many details and omitted most of what my sister-in-law had shared. He simply informed me that, due to the situation, he wouldn't be able to pick up our children this weekend. The 15-year-old boy is now staying with his biological father. As for what I mentioned earlier, my ex was 2 months behind on child support. And that same week, he was supposed to make another payment. He didn't, leaving him 3 months behind. In the end, his mother was the one who covered the overdue amount. Regarding the child who attends the same school as my son, it's not the 15-year-old involved in the altercation. It's the younger stepbrother who is 8 years old, the same age as my son. I decided to enroll my son in that school when the affair became public. At the time, I was working as a kindergarten teacher at the same school and the boy had been one of my students. We all knew each other, and to protect my children from rumors, I transferred them to a private school. This happened 2 months before the school year ended. Thanks to the circumstances and the support of some kind people, we managed to get them admitted. Wow, dude's so thick he can't see that the only person turning the kids against him is himself and his actions. Did he think that all the children and the marriages he destroyed would be understanding or something? Dude sounds like a narcissistic tool who will still be blaming you for turning the kids against him when they go no contact with him after they turn 18. Wait. So affair partner's son was in your kindergarten class, and you transferred your son to a different school to get away from them, and they moved affair partner's son to that school too? Seems rather crappy of them. But they are siblings now. They got to get along. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my girlfriend to stop telling me how to spend the money I won? I live in the UK and I recently won a life-changing amount of money. By this, I mean enough to quit my job and never work again. I live with my girlfriend and told her about the win. She was excited about the fact I'd won, and we started talking about what to do with it. We live in quite a deprived part of the UK, so my girlfriend immediately started talking about moving to a city and living somewhere nicer. I said no to this, as family and friends are nearby and my parents are both quite ill, so I don't want to move far away and have to travel far to see them. She said we could look at cities that aren't too far, but I again refused and just said we'll look at a nice house in a better part of the town we live in. She said she doesn't want to continue living here if we have this much money. I told her it's me who has won the money, so she doesn't get to tell me how to spend it. She just said she wants to move away, but I reiterated that it's my winnings, not hers, and the final decision is mine. She said I wasn't being fair by not considering it. But I told her she was being unreasonable for expecting to dictate how I spend the money. She said we're a couple and should be making the decisions together, but I told her that some things aren't up for discussion and that I'm not moving away. She just called me unreasonable and said I should be considering her opinion on it. Am I the a-hole for telling my girlfriend to stop telling me how to spend the money I won? Now for the comments. Do not get married to this woman without getting thorough legal advice on how to protect your assets. And I'd add, don't have a kid with her either. Don't leave debit or credit cards around. Change all passwords and bank statements. Don't tell anyone else about this, and laugh and say it was only $10,000 when people start asking questions. Always, always lie and say you have less. Recently won a life-changing amount of money. Pretty crazy how often this seems to happen on here. Some people really underestimate what is required to be able to quit and never work again. Financial literacy is quite low. When people win such massive amounts, they get the itch to spend. Forget the money for a moment. There's an existing incompatibility issue with not wanting to live in the same type of area. If that can't be solved, nothing else about this relationship, including how to spend the money, matters. My boss flipped out after I quit, and now he's threatening consequences. Original post. So, I joined this small tech R&D firm about 3 years ago. The boss is a former math major who started a company in his mid-20s. Initially, he had some early successes, winning a handful of awards totaling around $13 million in the first couple of years. When I joined, there were 13 people, and the place had this weird cultish vibe. Everyone called him the leader. He was super into coaching everyone and was always giving guidance. Fine, whatever. I was skeptical, but seemed like a good opportunity. During my final interview, he even had a human psych professor, his mentor, on the line to assess me. Weird? Yes, but okay. As time went on, I realized the entire company was full of yes men who were enamored with this guy's wisdom. He was always reading business theory books, obsessed with writing, and basically thought academic skills mattered more than actual business skills. Every decision was based on something he read, not an intuition or experience. He wasn't a businessman. He was an academic who happened to start a business. Shortly after I joined, he made the lead engineer, who he had coached, into a proxy CEO while he took a backseat. Problem was, the lead engineer didn't want to lead, didn't know how to make decisions, and had to run everything by the boss anyway, who was basically AWOL. The boss was off trying to find investors, but couldn't close any deals because his negotiation skills were purely theoretical and not rooted in any real-world experience. Fast forward 2 years and we're not winning any awards. Then one day after a big demo, the boss lays off half the company. No warning, no heads up, because his advisor told him to just cut everyone loose. The next day, the boss took a 2-week vacation, leaving me, the lead engineer, and one senior programmer to do everything. Yep, seriously. We busted our butts and won a small award. But then the lead engineer quit. After 8 years of loyalty and burnout, when he told the boss he was leaving, the boss basically said, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." A few months later, the senior programmer quit too. So now it's just me running the entire technical effort. There's one other person, a program manager, who deals with customers but mostly comes to me for help with anything resembling actual work. She's been with the company since day one and balances the boss's complete lack of people skills. Oh, and yeah, she's mentioned that she thinks he might be on the spectrum. For the last 6 months, I've been doing everything, seeking new business, working on current projects, trying to market and move our products. You name it, I'm doing it. Then a few weeks ago, my boss comes to me, all weepy, and says he can't assure the longevity of my job, so if I need stability, I should find something else. We talk a bit and I say I'm still working here hard, but nothing changes his attitude. He doesn't respect me or the two of us still here, he just keeps pushing and micromanaging. Yesterday, after a 2-hour working session, he tells me he wants to coach me. He says, "You have a great ownership skills, great technical skills, great leadership skills, but you need to have better directability. I need to be able to tell you and direct you in what to do." I'm sitting there nodding along, but in my head, I'm like, seriously? There's no one left. I'm carrying this company. You aren't doing the work. Do you even know how to do the work? This guy has never worked for anyone. All his decisions come from stuff he's read, not from actual experience. Who are you to coach me when I've got 10 years of real-world grind experience? And then he goes off talking about the future success of the firm and how he needs more control. Control of the two of us who haven't quit yet. Oh, and when the other engineers quit, the boss had an emergency meeting with me and a program manager to talk about the firm's future and vision. But it was all theoretical nonsense. He started yelling at us when we asked actual questions about concrete steps we could take. He just wanted to go on about our values rather than actually build a plan. And don't even get me started on his non-stop requests for reports. He critiques every word, analyzing them to death. I'm like, dude, we could have a 2-minute conversation and I'd answer all your questions. But nope, he needs written reports. Recently, he sent me a feedback document from one of our bids. And is like, read this and explain it to me. Dude, it's not that complicated. Just read it. Then, after I explain, he asks for more clarification and proof that I'm right. I've been here almost 3 years, doing everything, and he still doesn't trust me to understand a simple document? At this point, I'm just waiting out the interviews I'm in the later stages of because I cannot deal with this anymore. Let's read the top comments before reading the update. Okay, what? The boss is a moron and at least somewhat verbally abusive with no real leadership skills or knowledge. And yet you've stayed there for 3 years running the entire technical side and letting him run roughshod all over you? Why are you just looking for a new job now? If OP leaves, boss likely has to completely shut the company and can salvage some cash out of it. As it stands, OP has been drawing a paycheck while boss digs a deeper and deeper debt hole. They aren't making money, which means boss is building more debt the whole time. It's the long burn. Boss won't take any responsibility, but he'll be equally forked. Yeah, this is what my family's all saying. If I quit, the company is screwed. I think he would get a contractor to finish whatever work we do have and then go back to consulting. OP should start his own business and become a direct competitor. Take all the useful employees. Take all the customers. I want to. Money's the problem. And product. I can't just market myself. And I don't have the resources, money, product, idea, etc. to start anything right now. The only question I have is, why you didn't leave sooner? I don't want to keep leaving jobs. I had to stay long enough for it to not be a red flag for future employers. Now for the update 2 months later. After grinding through endless micromanagement and carrying my entire department on my back, I finally accepted a new job offer. I sent my boss an email letting him know I'd be resigning and offered 2 options. I could finish my high-priority writing project, the one I kept emphasizing, and leave by mid-month, or I could stay until the end of the month to wrap up everything, including the technical project and all the admin/business tasks I'd been handling solo. My new job was starting on the 28th, so for the past week, I've been working both jobs. My new one from 9 to 5 and the old one from 5 p.m. until midnight or later. I documented everything down to the smallest detail, so he'd have all he needed. I didn't feel I needed to spell this schedule out to him, since the company always operated on flexible hours. He replied saying he was disappointed but understood, so I thought we were good. But then he called and let me know just how disappointed he was. Apparently, I was supposed to seek his blessing before leaving. The irony? When he hired me, he didn't even want to give me 2 weeks to leave my last role. He expected me to start the Monday after sending the offer on a Thursday. From the day I submitted my resignation until my last day, my boss was mostly absent. I kept sending him detailed update emails, asking if he needed anything else and checking in to make sure he'd be set for the transition. But he was nowhere to be found. You'd think he'd be the most engaged at this point. This is his company, and I'm literally the last technical employee left, apart from the program manager, whom he actually instructed me not to inform of my departure until the day before I left. I practically had to chase him down to ensure he was getting everything he needed. For someone who's repeatedly insisted on control and micromanaged endlessly, he was oddly disengaged and unresponsive during the only time it really mattered. So, he scheduled a handoff meeting for Thursday at 2 p.m., but I already had meetings for my new job. I suggested 4 p.m., and he got upset, questioning why I was still working if I'd already quit. I clarified that I was splitting my time for a smooth transition, and he absolutely lost it. I explained it was either this arrangement or leaving him high and dry, but he was still furious. Finally, at 4 p.m., he showed up for the meeting, his first involvement in any part of the transition. He asked for a full walkthrough of everything. I had already put it all in writing, with flawless documentation, reports, and tutorials, but I ran through it anyway. For hours, no breaks. Every single question answered, everything demonstrated. When we wrapped up, he said, "We might still need some guidance on things." I started to say, for what it's worth, I never meant to, but he cut me off, saying he's seeking counsel on how to deal with his situation. He claimed nobody's ever done this to him before, then vaguely threatened to figure out what he needs to report before storming off. I'm beyond frustrated. Despite everything, I really try to leave on good terms. I busted my butt to get every last detail done, even working long hours after quitting to make sure everything was flawless for him. I kept things professional, communicated often, and documented every project and process. I was ready to put this behind me and try to reach out for a genuine conversation at the end, maybe even find a bit of closure. But instead, he had to make things difficult, ignoring all my efforts until the last second, then dragging me through a grueling 4-hour session. When I tried to wrap it up amicably, he shut me down with a vague threat and stormed off. He made a tough ending even worse, and it's a huge relief to finally be done with it. Quit immediately and let him drown. He is an insufferable prick. Hey, too late. Already handed it all off. Plus, didn't want to give him a bigger reason to accuse me of malicious intent. That is, theft, damages, etc. Unless you have a signed contract stipulating a longer notice period, there is absolutely nothing he can do to retaliate legally. As things stand, you are more than professional in giving him notice and ensuring a good handoff. Whatever counsel he is looking for will tell him the same thing. If you are in the US, most states are at will, meaning neither party needs to give any notice for the end of employment. And there is no legal consequences, outside of government jobs and some other small exceptions. Good on you for finally getting out of there, and not give them another thought and focus on your new job with hopefully a better environment. I'm concerned more that he'll try to rack up some sort of malicious activity complaint, stealing/mishandling IP, deleting stuff, etc. Obviously, my counter to that is that I handed everything off with 0 problems and went above and beyond to get it to him. But it would be such a headache. Or like, what if he finds out who I'm working for and reports me to them? No worries, his place is closing soon. Really hope he finds something to do or wins something. He has a big family, wouldn't want him to actually have financial hardship. Second update. The following morning, my ex-boss emailed me with the standard exit paperwork. In this, he included his version of the timeline of events since I resigned, an excerpt from some onboarding paperwork where I agreed not to disparage the company, work for a competing company, etc. He also claimed that I had committed to provide ongoing support as needed for the next 12 months. Finally, he wanted all the home office equipment I received when I started working returned, a mismatched chair, desk, headphones, etc. I sent back a very direct and pointed email with my version of events, detailing everything I had done for him, and firmly stated that I did not commit and will not provide ongoing support. I haven't heard back since. While coordinating dropping off my home office equipment with the program manager, she offered and coordinated with the boss for me to buy the equipment for $500, actual value close to $1,500. So I got to keep my setup for a good price. I mailed a check, sent an email confirming the agreement, and I am done. Done. To those saying I was simping too hard or shouldn't have worked so much, I take pride in my work. If I'm leaving, I won't give anyone an option to say the company failed because of me or something I did. Or worse, for my ex-boss to go to my new employer and throw me under the bus. B, ethically, I have a responsibility to do the work I'm paid to do. I was still being paid, so I did the work. C, there was a lot of strange paperwork I had to sign when I joined the company. I did more than I might have needed to cover my bases. Last story. My brother is broke and wants me to buy him a house. My brother is a lot older than me, and for the last 20 years, he has lived in a fully owned 4-bedroom house and after his divorce in several different huge rented houses. He's taken multiple foreign holidays per year, drives Audi/Mercedes level cars, owns his own business, and seemed to be doing really well. I can honestly say I didn't feel a shred of jealousy, envy, or resentment while I lived in small 2- and 3-bedroom houses in a poorer area. Maybe we went camping or took a very cheap holiday once a year. We saved up for 2 years to go to Greece that one time. I was happy with what I had, which I want to make clear was a perfectly normal standard of living for my family and my own children. I was pleased for him when he told me about his holiday plans. I'd often visit him in these houses and tell him how great they were, super proud of him, looking up to him, thinking it was great he was doing so well. Last week, he told me he's in massive personal and business debt and will be homeless in around a month's time. This happened at a very strange time for me. I landed an amazing job 6 years ago, and through a combination of luck, years of hard work, and intelligence, I was promoted to a high level. I'm now going to receive, for me, life-changing quantities of RSUs. You can probably figure out what I'm doing. I still live in a very small house, but my wife and I aspire to a place by the sea where we can walk the dog. I also want to set up for my kids for university and prepare them for their own lives in this current cost of living crisis. He asked that I use the money I'll be receiving to buy him a nice house. He suggested I keep ownership as an investment and that he would pay rent. Now we're at the off-my-chest part. There is no way I'm using this life-changing money to continue a lifestyle for someone else that was far in excess of what I had, and that would come at the cost of that kind of life for myself and my children. I told him I can pay rent on a flat for 3 months, so he isn't homeless. But I'm not buying him a house to live in. I'm not investing in property. And even if I were, I'd never rent to a family. That's a mess waiting to happen. Would I evict him if he stopped paying rent? Maybe I feel guilty. Maybe I need strangers on the internet to validate me or tell me I'm wrong. I just needed to get this off my chest. I can't really talk to other family members about it because that would mean disclosing my RSUs, and that everyone would know I have money now. As for me, I plan to keep my costs within my means. I know this job could go away at any point, so I need to save while I can. It's crazy that he even suggested you to buy him a house. You've made a very generous offer to help him find a flat and pay rent. I wish I had someone offer to help me find a place and pay rent for 3 months. More than generous. Do not pay for anything, including his rent. Do not enable his behavior. He knew this situation and still chose to increase his debt over time with no plan to do anything about it. And now the plan is for someone else to cover him? He needs to learn to live within his means. This is not your responsibility. Thanks, I needed to hear that. I made the offer, so I won't go back on it, but that's it. Make sure you stick to your 3-month limit. Write it in a contract if you need it. If you can, make sure this hypothetical flat is in an area he should be able to afford. No high-rises or a penthouse. He's going to ask for 3 more months, then 3 more. My friend Lisa's father was always overspending on going out, drinking, generally being irresponsible. He borrowed money endlessly, until one day he had burned all his bridges. He asked Lisa to let him move in with her, as he was completely broke. She said it broke her heart, but she said no. She said she would let him come over to her place once a week to shower, and would bring him a bag of food once a week. She arranged to meet him on a certain bus bench at a certain time. She said it was the hardest thing she ever had to do, leaving him there. But within a few weeks, he had found an apartment complex where he could do janitor/landscaping work in return for sleeping in a storage room. He got another part-time job and started saving money. Within a year, he had gotten himself sorted out. Sometimes letting someone fail is the best thing for them. That's sobering. I don't see this coming to such a situation, but that's certainly some perspective.